Pink Edition.
Hey, what's up everybody, TechChucker here, and today is a very special day for me. I am finally revealing my completed diorama. I have worked on this for upwards of 2 years. I present to you my secret stash diorama. I'm super excited. My inspiration to this, I used to watch the Comic Book Men show, and when it got canceled, I was pretty bummed about that. And so I decided, you know what, I am going to memorialize that through a diorama. It took me so long to do this. I scoured the internet because I've never actually been to the store, so I didn't have pictures to be able to reference. So I had to find as many pictures as I could online. I think I did a pretty darn good job of, matching it pretty closely. Now, the dimensions of this thing are pretty big. It is 24.25 inches wide by 13.75 inches deep by 30.25 inches high. So this thing is pretty sizable. It is, of course, a 1/12 scale diorama. That's usually what I work in. It is fully collapsible. Everything can come apart. I wanted it to be that way because I'm likely going to sell this thing. So if you're interested, DM me or PM me or whatever you want to call that. But it is fully collapsible. It is magnetized, but I wanted to use minimal magnets because there were certain pieces that I wanted to have structurally stronger. And so I used slots and I used pegs to be able to put this thing together, and I think it worked pretty good. There are some things I certainly would have done differently. I also 3D printed some custom brackets to hold the back part because it just wasn't strong enough. Because of how tall it is a little bit heavy on the top because of the header. Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty showcase of this thing. We've got a bunch of accessories. All of these are accessories that I created, starting with the tree. If you followed my Instagram for any amount of time, you've seen the progression a little bit of this tree. This is what I've been working on it for, and I am super happy with how it turned out. It started off as just a wood dowel with some, I forget what gauge wire it is, wrapped around there with a bunch of hot glue and sawdust and white PVA glue and paint and flock chunks to make this tree. There are things obviously I would have done a little bit differently. The green wool that I used as the outer shell, I might have used something a little bit different because it was hard to get stuff to stick to it, but I think it turned out pretty good. Then I 3D printed these light fixtures, which I actually designed these myself. What I would have liked to have done differently is I would have liked to actually get them wired for real lights, and maybe if I have time, I'll redesign it. It got to the point where it was just a little bit too thin that these pipes, I wasn't going to be able to run any wires through it, so I might fashion something a little bit differently, maybe. And then I also designed these upper lights that go up on the top, and I think these turned out pretty good. Also, if I had the ability to print with some transparent colored plastic, then maybe I would have made those lights working as well. But I'm still pretty happy with how these turned out. I found a 3D design for this parking meter. It's not it's not a match for what is actually at the store or in front of the store, but I think it turned out okay enough. This is where I think my paint skills, I didn't do as good of a job as I would have liked for this one, but it still, I think, turned out pretty darn good. And then I 3D designed this coffee can, which I'm really happy with how this turned out. I found a label, a Folgers label that I printed out, glued it on there, painted this thing up, weathered it, and then I used some, It's some sort of silicone, I think, that I poured in there with a little bit of brown paint to kind of give it a gross look. And if if you take a look at pictures of the actual secret stash, they have a can out front, and I think that's for cigarette butts and whatnot. So I wanted to have that out front. And then I designed and 3D printed this fire hydrant. It's a wall-mounted hydrant, and I painted it with a brass paint. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out as well. I think it looks pretty darn good. This is one of my earlier designs, so I had to do quite a few different print tries to get this to work the way that I wanted it to, and I think it turned out pretty darn good. And then last of the accessories is this utility. It's a gas utility that I worked through, and I did a tutorial video, which I'll link to in the description below, and there's probably a little thing coming up in the upper right hand corner of that tutorial where I used Gundam sprues to fashion this utility together, and this I'm really happy with. It turned out so well, even better than I was expecting. So it's really fun to be able to mix in some 3D printed items, some handmade items, and then also I created this door. Not only did I do the obviously the entire window facade, but the door itself is 3D printed, and this was kind of complicated because I wanted to put in the glass, and so I had to design in a slot for the glass to be able to slide into the door because I wanted to be able to have that option. I think it turned out great. The only thing that isn't there for the door are actual hinges. I haven't gotten to that point in my 3D modeling capabilities yet to be able to do that, but I think it still turned out awesome. And then all of these signs that are strewn throughout the door and the windows, obviously they're printed, color printing. I tried to utilize as many posters and whatnot that are relevant to Kevin Smith and Clerks and all of that, so that it ties it all together. So when you're looking at it, you obviously know this is Comic Book Men, it is Secret Stash, it is Kevin Smith. And then the one piece that I am most proud of, but also a little bit like, man, I could have done better, is the actual Secret Stash sign. I hand carved this out of just your regular foam, the polystyrene foam or whatever that stuff is. I hand did that. What I did is I printed off a copy of the actual sign that I found online, and I cut that out to the size that I wanted, cut out the piece of foam to the size that I wanted, and then I just started carving it out. I drew out parts of what I wanted, and then other parts I simply just free-handed it and then painted it up as best I could. Even the letters that I did on the sign, all of it was hand done. This was well before I had a 3D printer. If I had had a 3D printer, certainly the small Jay and Silent Bob's sign, I would have 3D printed those letters. The big letters, I think those turned out amazing for my skill set. All I did for that was printed off the picture of the actual building that I found online and traced that out, cut it out, and put those on top of the foam and cut those out as carefully as I could and painted it up, and I think it turned out really, really well. And the last piece that I had to add in, I wanted to have as much detail as possible, and so that's where I used some different mosses that I got from my Hobby Lobby, and I used some old coffee grounds to mix in for the tree base to make that look as close to dirt and grass as possible. And I also strewed some of that around in the gutters to try and make that look like it is realistic. Glued it down with some very watered down PVA glue, and then I used some old tea leaves, and I think I took this idea from Euler's workshop. They had shown a little demonstration of using tea leaves and strewn some of that around on the bottom of around the tree mostly, and glued that down as well, and I think that really adds to the look of this thing. So overall, I couldn't be more happy with how this thing turned out. Obviously it took way too long, but I am so happy with how it turned out. It is probably my favorite diorama I've made thus far to date. Obviously it would be my dream if Kevin Smith were just to see it on Instagram and give it a like, because you know, it really was a memorial to a show that I loved watching. It was super fun being able to meet Ming Chen at the Comic-Con here in my town, the Nerdin' Out Con, and so this was my tribute to a show that I loved and hated seeing be canceled. So there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little showcase of my diorama, my secret stash dio. I'm not certain what my next project is going to be, but it probably won't be as big of an endeavor as this one, but I always say that and then it winds up being bigger. So let me know what you thought in the comments below. Hit the like button, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification, and I will see you in the next video.